This seems like a really controversial and wide-ranging measure that the government's shoving down our throats, especially in a tourist town like Kelowna.
Business in the Okanagan matters. This is Law Talk with lawyers Clay Williams and Tanveer Gill from FH&P Lawyers LLP. They talk business and take your questions at podcast@fhplawyers.com. Now, here's Clay Williams.
So for our listeners that don't know, we're actually moving from our one of our current spaces and kind of combining several into Landmark 4s.
Yes, we used to be on Lawrence, on Bernard, and our other office in West Kelowna, which is staying, but now we are no longer on Lawrence and Bernard. We are just going to be in Landmark, West Kelowna, Penticton, and we do have somebody in Salmon Arm too.
We do, but it'll be nice to actually, it's been quite hectic with the move. So we're talking about what everybody else is talking about, I think, in the community.
Oh, yeah.
Is the government's new rules on short-term rentals.
Yep. So the BC government has introduced legislation set to go into effect May 2024. And this new law essentially creates new rules for short-term rentals and what a lot of people are referring to it as Airbnb laws. Even though it's more than just Airbnb, it's Vrbo, it's anything that's online where you've done a short-term booking through private accommodation, not motels, hotels, not RVs, things like that. I specifically excludes tents if anyone's wondering, but the general bookings that we look at. So Airbnb is generally what people are thinking about.
And so with us today is Russell. Welcome. Russell's one of our associates. He's been around for a while now, and you're here to help us explore this topic.
I'm excited to be here. I'm new to the firm. I came here in March. It's still getting people used to pronouncing my name correctly. It's Tse. But as the new guy, it's been a whirlwind. I love working at FH&P, and the move has been quite an experience to say the least. But I love Landmark building, so I'm happy to be back over there. I'm basically a 5-year call. I was called to the bar in 2019, and since that time, I worked at a smaller firm, and then moved on to FH&P, and I've been happy here ever since.
What type of law do you practice?
Primarily general solicitor type work, so do real estate, conveyancing, corporate, business law, anything under the sun that doesn't involve me going to court.
Perfect.
All right. And so let's talk about these short-term rentals. And as Tanveer had mentioned, it's pretty wide-ranging.
It covers, quite a large swath of properties in Kelowna, being a high tourist destination. So we have a lot of upset clients about their second homes and whatnot, but the purpose of why this is even being brought in by the BC government, we have extremely high cost of housing, extremely high cost of rent, and with recent inflections of inflation and less than sustainable interest rates, the result is unaffordability. And so the BC government wants to create more homes for people, and that is actually what the initiative is called, of the Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act, which is basically limiting speculation within Kelowna in terms of having secondary properties for short-term rentals, things of that nature.
Well, and I guess the first thing when I'm listening to him, I'm thinking he's just spouting what the government wants to hear.
Yeah. I don't know. Does it actually make sense?
I wonder. I mean, this seems like a really controversial and wide-ranging measure that the government's shoving down our throats, especially in a tourist town like Kelowna.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you think about some of the houses, and not all of them by far, but a lot of the houses that are up on Airbnb, and especially if you go to a certain price range, these aren't homes that you're going to have the average tenant coming, looking, and renting on a long-term basis. These are luxury homes or waterfront homes that people are specifically coming to spend a summer, like maybe a month in summer. And these clients have multiple homes where they might leave for a couple of weeks or a couple months and use that house. So I don't know. I don't know if this works in practice. I'm super confused. But I was also confused when they did the foreign ban, and I don't know that that's actually working either.
Which
so
has been extended
for another
years,
to 2027. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think this is going to achieve what they're trying for it to achieve.
Yeah, I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned about its effect on a place like Kelowna. We rely on tourism so much. So I guess the question I've got then for Russell is, well, what's left? Like what kind of short-term rental other than going to a hotel is the government allowing us?
Well, they're not canceling short-term rentals. If you have a principal residence, you can still use your principal residence for short-term rentals, but you have to be able to say that it's your principal residence.
Well, that's what I was getting
Yeah.
at. So there's you can still get a short-term rental, but what is the context within a principal rental?
Yeah, so I can have my property up on Airbnb as long as it's my principal residence. I can't buy a secondary home and solely use my secondary home for Airbnb rentals or Expedia or whatever listed on Kijiji or Castanet for someone to come and do short-term rentals.
Okay. So it's just like these places that you've been talking about, but there's more than that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's purpose-built short-term rentals, and
Yep.
what are they're supposed to be rented out on a long-term basis now, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think going back to the primary restriction being the principal residence, where you're receiving your bills, where you're receiving your tax, look at your driver's license, that's going to be your principal residence.
And there's no rule for if I live there 6 months or 8 months or 9 months out of the year. It's just where you more live. Primarily reside. Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's up to you to say, where do you primarily reside?
Yeah, I guess that does that really help? I mean, you got to live somewhere. So where I live, I guess I could rent out rooms in my house still.
I have a client that lives in Alberta who has a house on the water and literally has her businesses in Alberta, her kids in Alberta, but lives here maybe 6-7 months out of the year. So she was like, what is my principal residence? I have bills coming here, I have bills coming there. I evenly split my time. She's sort of retiring, so she's not active in the business, but she has business in Alberta, and now she can't Airbnb her place because she's scared to say, is it a principal residence? She feels like it's a principal residence, but I don't know.
How often is she in that property?
Like 6 to 7 months a year, depending on the weather. If the weather's nicer, she'll stay longer. If she goes to Alberta, she's there for a bit, comes back, but has a house there as well, has cars there, has a house here, has cars here, like literally evenly splits her time between both.
Boy, nice gig if you.
Oh, yeah.
I guess.
Pretty tough. I would say talk to your accountant.
It's hard to say.
There are a list of a decent amount of exempted accommodations. Is kind of what Clay was speaking to. For example, certain strata type of hotels or motels, properties that have mandatory rental pool or rental management agreements in place.
Like timeshares?
Timeshares is a separate exemption of its own. But yeah, that's more or less it. There's also quite a few exemptions for ski resort properties.
I understand Big White is completely exempt.
Big White falls within there. Blackcomb, Whistler, Whitewater kind of falls within whether it's privately owned or on specific types of land or municipal land.
Yeah, that's important. At least they're leaving Big White alone.
Oh my gosh, could you imagine if they canceled short-term in Big White? That would never happen. That'd be insane.
Now, are there new licensing requirements that are coming in as well, or does that stay the same?
That's right. So there is a business license that needs to be applied for, and of course there's many eligibility requirements. These eligibility requirements are essentially you must meet the principal residence requirement, meaning that you are renting out of your principal residence. There is some business license available for secondary use short-term rentals, but I'll get into that in a moment. So continue with the eligibility requirements. Must be your principal residence. Contact information for designated persons responsible for overseeing the unit must be provided upon application and posted within the accommodation.
So you apply for a license with the city. You have to give them a number of things, and then I understand people with these accommodations have to show the license on their listing, right?
They'll have to show their license on their listing, and by the end of 2024, there'll be a registry where all of these licensees will be listed.
Crazy. It's going to be hard. I don't know.
And I'm sure there'll be a whole new government department here.
Because right now the council's fully in support of the short-term ban. I went on and read some stuff that's on their news, page of their blog. Sorry, don't mind my baby making noises in the background. I went on and read their blog page where they show in the news, what's coming down the pipeline. And so they are making changes, or they have made changes now as of January to the bylaws. So Kelowna's fully in support. Our council's in support.
And I think that the registry is primarily going to answer the question of how are they going to enforce this. They're going to look basically on all of these short-term rental websites like Airbnb, check the rentals in Kelowna, see if that
Match them
person
up.
is licensed.
Yeah.
And if they're not, I saw also that they're going to start inspecting short-term rental units. So that comes with a whole host of legal problems, which of course, if someone is coming to inspect your property, give us a call. There's many issues with the idea of being able to freely go and enter people's properties to inspect whether they are compliant or not.
Yeah. I saw the penalty increase. So the max fine that a regional district can fine now has gone up from $2,000 to $50,000. And for municipal ticketing, it's per day. The fine used to be $1,000 and now it's $3,000. So come May, if you're confused about whether you're on the right side or the wrong side of this, give us a call.
Right. So they're trying to beef up the ability of municipalities to enforce their bylaws. Previously, bylaws were often contravened. I think it's legal but non-enforced or something like that is a term that they use for short-term rentals specifically. So this provincial enactment is going to be able to obviously increase the teeth of bylaws in each municipality.
It seems like what they want is, so let's say I put something up on Airbnb, but it's not my principal residence, so I'm breaking this law. It looks like what they want is that the local government, so Kelowna, or, our local government is monitoring that Airbnb listing of mine, and then they go and report me to the provincial government until the provincial government has something set up where they're going to be monitoring this. And on their website, it looked like they said they were going to establish something, but I don't know what that'll look like, because they're, a floor in one of their in one of their offices dedicated to Airbnb monitoring.
I guess my takeaway to whatever's going to happen is just more government, and great, more stuff we get to pay for.
Of course, I think you nailed it, because they are actually establishing an overseer for this exact thing that you are mentioning. They're going to have an entire different branch just to make sure people are compliant with this. So,
but that'll also require Airbnb, Vrbo, Expedia, and all of these sites to then provide information back to the provincial government. Which, are they required to do that?
Good question. But that is, again, they're going to start releasing information to the website saying that we require everybody to have a business license, send us your information back. Whether or not these websites are actually going to do it, and we'll see how that trickles down. But that is a major requirement.
Yeah. So for what this means for us locally in Kelowna, like I said, our council is in support. They are changing bylaws. They have changed bylaws. So principal and secondary uses in our bylaws are no longer going to have short-term rentals. I think there's some small exemptions, but at the end of the day, if you're not compliant with what the legislation says, if it's, for example, not your principal residence and you're trying to do a short-term rental, you can't do it. So if it's not in line with what the legislation is, then you're not in line with what the bylaws are going to say. They're also changing the definition of short-term. So in the legislation, it's short if it's anything less than 90 days. And I think our bylaws previously had something maybe 30 days or such, but it's going to be in line with the legislation now, which is anything under 90 days. So 3 months is not going to be long-term. 3 months is still short-term. It'll apply to Kelowna, West Kelowna, Lake Country, and Penticton.
Wow. And so what about people who have already booked these things? And,
sucks to be them.
Well, look at Kelowna in the summertime. I mean, I'm sure there have been many people
already booked.
So I'm coming to Kelowna to go for a holiday.
Yeah.
How does this legislation affect those people who have booked in, say, July?
Yeah, it looks like if the host isn't compliant, then they need to cancel that booking. I was watching a video from some government department, I don't know who it was speaking to this, but they had said what they expect is that people who have booked, they expect them to go contact the host to ask them, hey, I've booked with you for, May, June, July. Are you compliant? ? And if they're not, then it's up to you to cancel on your end, which I don't see that happening. If someone's coming up from Washington to come spend a summer, weekend here, are they going to go message their host to see whether their host is compliant with our rules? Or are they even going to know about our rules? Obviously.
They're just going to show up and told no, sorry, there's no place for you.
Yeah, imagine like our festivals that we have, annually that people have bookings for, weddings, winery tours, people who are planning their summer in Kelowna. If your host is not compliant, all of these bookings are canceled. Imagine having a wedding. How many people would then have to be, shuffled around to a hotel?
Maybe it's a good time to buy
A hotel.
a hotel or build a hotel because, boy, if I owned a hotel right now, I'd be rubbing my hands together. All right, until next time. Thank you, Russell. Thank you, Tanvir.
Great. Thanks for having me.
For listening. If you love our podcast as much as we do, like, follow, and subscribe.
As much as Tanvir's mom does. And don't forget to send your questions to podcast@fhplawyers.com.
FH&P lawyers are rooted in community and ready to help. Send your business law questions to podcast@fhplawyers.com.